let's start with you, Will. You started this game,
I did.
and then you chose to stop, and kind of wanted to see if you'd be willing to open up about that a little bit.
Of course. Yeah, pretty interesting experience. Interesting is putting it lightly. I would say it was more disturbing for me, which is kind of a first. So my history with, sort of just violent video games is pretty long. Never really had an issue with them, but there was one game in particular, Manhunt, that I played many, many moons ago when I was, probably 18, 19 years old. And I remember having some issues with that for obvious reasons. When you're putting bags over people's heads and stuff like that, it tends to be a little bit gruesome. But with Last of Us 2, I enjoyed it for the most part. And I only played probably, 3 hours, just under 4, I believe. And as the game progressed, I just felt really kind of disturbed with the content and what the game sort of forces you to do. And I think a lot of that is because the game is really good, and it's extremely realistic from a graphical perspective as well as sound design and really everything. So what they did with 2, in my opinion, is they've obviously ramped up the realism with, just choking somebody out or, sneaking up behind a runner and stabbing them with Ellie's little shiv or knife that she has and just kind of ripping it out of their throat and seeing blood kind of spray. And you see and hear everything in this game. And I think I knew that going in, but when I would have sessions of playing the game for, say, an hour to 2 hours plus, it just became more and more disturbing for me, where it would just kind of increase my anxiety levels, and I felt uncomfortable, and I thought, you know what, this is probably normal because what I'm experiencing is disturbing content. But it just had an effect on me that was way greater than I think anything else I've experienced in other violent games, and I think a lot of it is just due to the fact that, naturally I'm kind of an anxious dude, especially if I'm put under a situation like that. And I have like weird OCD about stuff too. So like if I find something disturbing, it may stay with me longer than it would for your like average person that doesn't have OCD. So for example, if I had to do something that like crawling into like a ventilation shaft that had blood stains everywhere, and that kind of stuff might haunt me for like the rest of the day, or it might give me like a weird nightmare. And I was actually getting nightmares, not every night, but maybe like once a week, and I'd be like chased by runners and stuff. And I was like, this is normal. I've just got done playing the game and I played till 10:30 and then I went to bed at 11. So it makes sense. But it had such a profound effect that it caused me to discuss with you and other people about potentially stopping the experience. And I had to think hard about it because I thought, you know what, give it more of a chance. These things are normal. And then when I spoke to other people, I found like they weren't really having the same issue. So I reached out to the internet, did some research to see if anybody else was having similar issues. And I found a few articles where people spoke about their time with it and how they felt like it was overly violent. And it made me feel better about ending my experience with it. And I didn't really want to because I wanted to see where the story went. But I think ultimately it wasn't worth sort of prolonging that anxiety and the sort of disturbing feelings I would get from playing the game. And it just wasn't worth it. It wasn't making me feel comfortable. And it's interesting because, like I said, that's never happened to me before in any game.
Wow.
That's pretty heavy, man.
Yeah, I realize the older that I've got, I feel like my tolerance for violence has, I guess gone down. I used to watch movies like Event Horizon and Cube and The Shining and all those kind of like really creepy movies, and it wouldn't bug me. But every year that would go by and I'd watch stuff like that occasionally, I just grew more, I think just sort of emotionally affected by it, where like it would just kind of stick with me. I remember this movie, Only God Forgives, with Ryan Gosling. I actually enjoyed the movie. But there's some pretty disturbing stuff in that. And I think that when something is depicted in a very real way, it can stay with people. Not everybody, but for people like me. There was actually another movie, I can't remember what it's called now. It's done by Nicholas Winding Refn, who directed Only God Forgives and Drive. And I saw that movie in the theater. I think it was The Demon something. Can't remember it now. That movie highly, highly disturbed me. I remember I went alone and I left, and I was really, really creeped out for like a couple days, just because the way that he shoots the film, it's so real. Like you actually, it's like Hacksaw Ridge. I had the same problem with that movie. I saw it with Lauren. We were basically cringing the whole time because Mel Gibson, as we all know, is an incredible director, and he has a great sense of realism with his movies. And my tolerance for that is just, it's different. It mentally affects me more. And, I had a really tough bout with real anxiety and panic attacks when my father died in 2009. And, I still deal with that to this day. So I have to be careful with the content that I absorb, because I have one of those brains and sort of minds that really retains it and gets almost kind of obsessive about it. So I can't watch like back-to-back horror films. Like if somebody invited me over to watch like do one of those like horror nights, I'm out.
Right.
You won't see me there. And I might be at this point in my life a little bit more honest about it too, because I have nothing to hide. It's the way that I am, and my life outside of the podcast and work is very zen. I mean, that's true. Like I have Himalayan salt lamps. I have oil diffusers. I try to meditate. I have a didgeridoo. I do yoga. I try to relax a lot because, there's that underlying anxiety that I had when my father died that I have to kind of keep at bay. So,
Right.
That's really kind of the gist of it.
I mean, mental health is a very serious thing.
Yeah. You don't want to toy with it.
And it's something that I think we take for granted in this country, specifically, in the United States. I think a lot of people tend to downplay it or ignore it. And, it's starting to become a little bit more recognized, but it's very serious, and it can affect every aspect of your life if you're off balance, Like I can personally vouch for like that kind of level of anxiety when I was playing Doom Eternal at some points. When I started playing that game, we were just starting to really ramp up with the coronavirus in this part of the country. And I was not in a good place, and that game was not helping. And, I needed to kind of put it aside for a while, and, I was able to get back to it. But, it was, it took me a couple weeks before I felt comfortable doing so.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's dark material, and we are living in kind of dark times. I mean, they're a little bit better. There's light at the end of the tunnel. But yes, when you were playing Doom Eternal, I remember, a rough time at work and COVID. And when you kind of combine all those things and then you sit down, you play an incredibly maddening game where even though it's very violent and you're ripping up like, demons and stuff, so it's a little bit, quote unquote, healthier, I guess. It's still something stressful. And what's interesting about mental health is sometimes you don't realize that there are things that you do in your life that affect that, and you might think that they don't, but they actually do. And they do it from a subconscious level. So that's why I had to end my time with The Last of Us 2. And I don't regret it, but I do wish that the game was not as violent as it was, because I feel like I would have stuck with it, or I would have stayed with it, because Last of Us 1, I felt like it was a better experience from a violence perspective, because it was there. And there were some disturbing moments, but it was nowhere near as bad as it was for me with The Last of Us 2.
Well, I think you probably checked out of the experience at a good time, because it only gets worse from there.
Yeah, and that's what everybody kept telling me, and I was like, man, this is just making my time with it even worse. And I was getting like anxiety knowing that I like had to play it. Like if I knew, okay, I got nothing going on tonight, let me sit down with Last of Us 2, I would get like this weird like bubbling anxiety knowing that it was going to be like traumatic for me to load it up. And it was most of the time, especially, well, I don't want to say it now, but there's some things that happened in the game that we'll speak about, of course, on this episode that were really just tough to watch.